They told her to move out of first class because she didn't look like she belonged. No one questioned it. No one stood up. But when the pilot caught a glimpse of the Navy SEAL tattoo on her back, everything changed. This isn't just a story about first-class discrimination. It's a real hero story about service, sacrifice, and silent strength that can't be judged by appearances. Before we continue, drop a comment where in the world are you watching from. We'd love to see how far this story reaches. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started. Evelyn sat quietly near Gate 22 at LAX, her black leather jacket zipped halfway and her hair pulled into a tight bun. She wasn't flashy, and there was nothing about her appearance that screamed first class. Yet in her eyes was a calm intensity that hinted at something deeper. The day was overcast, the terminal buzzing with holiday travelers trying to catch flights before the storm rolled in. Evelyn clutched her boarding pass tightly. It was a one-way ticket to Boston for a funeral. Not just any funeral, but that of a fallen comrade. When boarding began, Evelyn stepped confidently toward the first-class line. A young flight attendant eyed her skeptically, glancing at her plain jeans and combat boots. "Ma'am, first class is for premium passengers only," the attendant said, trying to keep her tone polite, but clearly judging. Evelyn didn't flinch. "I am a first-class passenger," she said, handing over the ticket. The attendant hesitated, scanning the stub, then gave a forced smile. "My apologies," she mumbled, clearly not expecting the seat assignment to match the woman before her. But the damage had already been done. People were watching, whispering, already assuming Evelyn didn't belong. She said nothing. Not yet. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Evelyn sat silently in her window seat in first class. Her posture was upright, calm, and composed, but behind her stillness was a storm brewing. The glances hadn't stopped. A man 2 seats over had whispered something to his wife, prompting her to giggle behind a magazine. Across the aisle, a businessman in a sharp navy suit was clearly uncomfortable sharing space with someone he assumed had snuck her way up front. The flight attendant returned with a tray of drinks. She paused ever so slightly before reaching Evelyn. "Would you like something to drink, ma'am?" she asked, the word ma'am dripping with forced politeness. "Just water," Evelyn replied without lifting her eyes. Minutes passed. Then, a sudden jolt shook the cabin. Turbulence. The pilot's voice crackled through the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Evelyn barely blinked. But then a commotion erupted in the back of the plane. A man, visibly agitated and shouting in Spanish, rushed down the aisle, pushing past passengers. His eyes were wide, frantic. A second man, trying to stop him, stumbled behind. "He's not well." Someone screamed. The flight attendants tried to intervene, but the man was too quick. He charged past the curtain separating economy from first class, bumping into a passenger and nearly knocking over a tray. Panic rippled through the cabin. One flight attendant shouted for help. Another ran to the cockpit. And that's when Evelyn stood, in one smooth, controlled motion. She removed her jacket and stepped into the aisle, her shirt lifted just slightly, revealing the unmistakable tattoo across her lower back, an eagle clutching an anchor and trident. Wings spread wide, with the words Navy SEAL arched beneath. Gasps filled the air. The man in the suit dropped his phone. The couple who had giggled before now stared, mouths agape. Even the screaming stopped for just a moment. Then Evelyn moved. She spoke directly to the distressed man in fluent Spanish, her tone sharp but calm. "¿Estás herido? ¿Tienes dolor? Are you hurt? Are you in pain?" The man hesitated. His body shook, not from rage, but fear. His eyes darted, and then he began to cry. Evelyn gently lowered her hands, signaling no threat. "I'm here to help," she whispered. The second man finally caught up. "He's diabetic. I think he missed his insulin." Immediately, Evelyn turned to the nearest attendant. "Get sugar juice, soda, anything. Now." In under a minute, the crisis had de-escalated. The man was stabilized, breathing deeply, his hands trembling less. Evelyn returned to her seat, the cabin in stunned silence. But it wasn't over yet. The cockpit door opened and the pilot stepped out. He was tall, late 40s, silver streaks in his hair and eyes that scanned the first-class cabin sharply. When his eyes landed on Evelyn, he froze. His mouth parted, his voice caught in his throat. "Evelyn Grant," he said slowly. She looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Captain Mitchell." There was a beat of stunned quiet, and then the captain took a slow step forward. "She saved my life in Kandahar," he said, voice thick with emotion. "We were hit during a night op. I thought I was done for until this woman dragged me across 200 yards of open desert under enemy fire. She's the reason I'm standing here today." The cabin went dead silent. Even the baby crying in row 14 seemed to hush. Then applause. It started softly from the back. Then others joined. Soon, the entire plane, first class and coach, were clapping. The same flight attendant who had questioned her earlier now looked down in shame. The businessman who had judged her now stared at her like she was a hero, which she was. And Evelyn. She didn't smile, didn't stand to receive the praise. She simply looked out the window again, quiet as ever. As the applause slowly faded, the energy in the cabin shifted. The passengers who once doubted Evelyn now watched her with reverence, their judgment replaced with a humbled silence. But Evelyn wasn't looking for admiration. Her eyes remained fixed on the clouds outside, as if searching for something far beyond the horizon. Captain Mitchell still stood in the aisle, visibly emotional. "I can't believe it's you," he murmured again, stepping closer. "Last I heard, you disappeared off the grid after the mission. No one knew where you went." Evelyn turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Some ghosts are best left buried," she said softly. But before the conversation could continue, a sudden alarm sounded in the cabin. Beep, beep, beep. The flight attendants rushed toward the back. A passenger had collapsed near the lavatory, another medical emergency. Captain Mitchell's expression turned grave. "What the hell is going on today?" he muttered, then turned to Evelyn. "We could use your help again." Without hesitation, Evelyn stood and followed. This time, it was a middle-aged man in his 50s, unconscious and pale. His wife knelt beside him, sobbing. He just clutched his chest and dropped. "Please help him." A young flight attendant frantically shouted, "Is there a doctor on board?" No one responded. Evelyn dropped to her knees. She quickly checked the man's pulse. Faint, chest movements shallow. She looked around. We need a defibrillator now. Within seconds, an AED was brought over. Evelyn's hands moved with precision. She tore open the man's shirt, placed the pads, and began the procedure. Passengers crowded into the aisle, holding their breath. The first shock was administered. Still no response. Evelyn didn't flinch. She began CPR compressions, strong and steady. "Come on," she muttered, sweat forming on her brow. "Stay with me." The man's wife sobbed louder, begging her husband not to go. The second shock. A pause. Then a gasp. The man coughed violently, blinking as his eyes fluttered open. Gasps of disbelief rippled through the cabin. The wife let out a cry of joy, hugging him tightly. The flight attendant beside Evelyn broke down in tears. I didn't know what to do. You just saved him." Evelyn slowly stood, her hands trembling slightly now. "It's not my first time," she whispered, brushing her hair back from her face. But it was at that moment something even more unexpected happened. A teenage boy stepped forward from economy, his phone in hand. "Excuse me," he said shyly. I filmed the whole thing. Is it okay if I post this? People need to see who you really are?" Evelyn hesitated. She had spent the last few years trying to live a quiet life. After the trauma of combat, the loss of her closest teammates, and the weight of memories too heavy to carry publicly, fame was the last thing she wanted. But something in the boy's eyes struck her. He wasn't just looking at a viral moment, he was looking at a role model. Evelyn nodded once. "Just don't twist the story." "I won't," the boy promised. Within minutes, the plane returned to a strange calm. People whispered, eyes wide with awe. Evelyn sat back down in first class, now with a blanket around her shoulders and a bottle of water beside her. Captain Mitchell came by once more. "You never stopped serving." "Did you?" he asked. Evelyn looked up at him with a half smile. "Some of us don't know how." As he turned to walk back toward the cockpit, he paused and added, "After this flight, I think the whole world will know who you are." She didn't reply. But for the first time since boarding, she let herself breathe, really breathe. The hum of the engines filled the silence that followed. Though the crisis had passed, the atmosphere on the plane was no longer ordinary. Something intangible had shifted. A reverence had replaced the earlier doubt, and eyes once filled with judgment now brimmed with quiet admiration. Passengers began murmuring softly to one another. Not with gossip, but with curiosity and remorse. The man in the tailored suit, who had earlier given Evelyn a dismissive look, now stood and walked to her row. He looked awkward, almost childlike. "I owe you an apology," he said, voice low. "I misjudged you. Badly." Evelyn didn't look at him right away. She stared out the window, watching the sun break through the clouds. "You're not the first," she replied. He hesitated. "You shouldn't have had to prove anything. I should have known better." She turned, locking eyes with him. "Then make sure you remember this next time you see someone who doesn't fit the seat." He nodded, humbled, and returned to his seat. One by one, others followed. A young mother leaned over from the row behind, whispering, "Thank you for what you did." A teenage girl passed Evelyn a note scribbled on a napkin. "You're the bravest person I've ever seen." Even the flight attendant, the one who had tried to remove Evelyn from first class before takeoff, approached. Her eyes were glassy. "I was wrong," she whispered, almost too quiet to hear. "I let appearances guide my actions, and I'm so sorry." Evelyn didn't respond with bitterness. She simply gave a small nod. Forgiveness. Perhaps. Or maybe just understanding. But the most unexpected reaction came from the quietest section of the plane coach. A man in a faded veteran's cap stood up and raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we have a hero on board, and it's about time people recognized her." The cabin burst into spontaneous applause, not like before. This was slower, more emotional, more personal, the kind of clapping people do when they feel something deep in their chest. Evelyn closed her eyes, because while everyone around her had just discovered who she was, they didn't know the whole story. They didn't know about Carter, her teammate who bled out in her arms, or Reyes, the sniper who never missed, until he took one to the chest. They didn't know about the 16-year-old boy in Kandahar who ran into her arms asking for help and didn't make it out of the blast. Every life she saved carried a weight, and every life she lost an even heavier one. So no, Evelyn wasn't a hero to herself. She was a survivor, and surviving came with its own scars. Captain Mitchell returned once more to her row, crouching slightly to speak with her. "There's a reason we made it through," he said gently. "I believe that, and I think today, maybe you helped remind us all why." She opened her eyes, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm just doing what I was trained to do. What we were all trained to do." Mitchell nodded. "Well, you're doing more than that. You're teaching people who've never seen war, who've never faced death, what real courage looks like." The two veterans sat in silence for a long moment. No rank, no uniforms, just shared history. Back in Coach, the teenage boy who had filmed the incident opened his phone. His video had already gone viral. Thousands of likes, thousands of comments. "Who is she? She saved 2 lives on 1 flight. Put her in charge of the country." The video had a title now, "Woman Mistaken for Economy Passenger. Turns out to be Navy SEAL Saves Man's Life. Mid-flight." As the plane began its descent into Boston. Evelyn glanced down at her tattoo, now hidden beneath her shirt again. It wasn't a decoration. It was a memorial to a team that didn't come home. The world now saw her as a hero. But to her, she was just one of the few still carrying the names of the fallen on her skin and in her soul. The plane touched down in Boston just as the sun began to rise, painting the horizon with golden streaks that spilled across the runway. For most passengers, the landing signaled the end of a flight. For Evelyn, it marked the beginning of something she hadn't expected, something she wasn't sure she wanted. As they taxied to the gate, Evelyn remained seated, letting the others disembark first. She stared down at her hands, still bearing faint tremors from the adrenaline. Her plan had been simple: attend the funeral, say goodbye to a fallen teammate, and disappear again, quietly, as always. But fate had other ideas. As she stepped off the plane, she was met not with the cold, anonymous bustle of the terminal, but with flashing cameras and a crowd that had already gathered from the video gone viral. "Miss Grant, is it true you're a Navy SEAL? Can you tell us what happened on board? Why haven't we heard of you before?" Evelyn's heart raced. She wasn't built for spotlights. She scanned the crowd, eyes darting for a way out when a firm but familiar voice called out. "Over here." Captain Mitchell was waiting near baggage claim, having pulled a few strings to meet her. By his side was a woman in uniform, younger, composed, holding a clipboard. She extended her hand. "Lieutenant Harris, U.S. Navy Public Affairs. Miss Grant, you've caused quite a stir." "I didn't mean to," Evelyn muttered, shaking her hand reluctantly. "I believe you," Harris said, "but whether you wanted it or not, people are listening, and maybe they need to." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Listening to what? To someone who's lived it, someone who understands the price of silence. Captain Mitchell stepped in. "There's a program, Evelyn. It's called Echo Shield. It pairs combat veterans with high school students in underserved communities. You talk, they listen. Not about politics. Not about war stories, but about resilience, leadership, purpose. And we need someone like you." Evelyn froze. The offer hit harder than she expected. "I'm not a speaker," she said. "I don't do crowds." Harris nodded. "Then don't speak to crowds. Speak to one kid at a time. That's how you make real impact." The idea stirred something inside her, unexpected, uncomfortable, but real. For so long, Evelyn had believed her only value came from what she could do: rescue, fight, survive. But maybe, just maybe, her voice could be as powerful as her actions. Still, she hesitated. "Why now?" Mitchell smiled softly. "Because someone just reminded the world that quiet heroes still walk among us. And this time, They're ready to listen. She thought of the boy on the plane, the wife of the man she saved, the girl who passed her the note. Evelyn exhaled. "Fine," she said. "I'll meet with them. One meeting. No promises." "Fair enough," Harris replied, scribbling down her contact info. As they parted ways, Evelyn exited the terminal and felt the cold Boston air hit her face. The streets were wet from an earlier rain, the city still waking up. She walked with purpose, but not the kind she was used to, not the kind that came from orders or missions. This was something different. Later that afternoon, as she stood at the edge of the cemetery, Evelyn finally reached the headstone she had flown across the country to visit. The name carved into the granite read, Thuonomathon. 2. Nathan Carter Brothers Never Left Behind. She knelt beside it, pulling from her jacket the seal trident pin she had worn since her first deployment. Slowly, she placed it on the headstone, her fingers lingering. "I thought this was the end," she whispered. "But maybe it's just the next mission." Behind her, wind rustled the autumn leaves, and somewhere deep inside, something heavy shifted, not gone, but lighter. Evelyn stood up taller than before, turned from the grave, and walked toward a new kind of battlefield, one that didn't require weapons, but needed her strength all the same. 3 weeks later, Evelyn found herself standing in front of a small classroom in a public high school in New Hampshire, far from battlefields, far from protocols, and even farther from her comfort zone. She had kept her word, one meeting, one classroom. The room smelled faintly of old textbooks and floor wax. A poster on the back wall read, "You matter. Your story matters." Evelyn stared at it as the bell rang and the students shuffled in, half interested, half exhausted from whatever weight teenagers carried these days. She stood quietly by the whiteboard, hands in her pockets, dressed simply jeans, boots, a flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves. The teacher gave a short introduction. "This is Evelyn Grant. She's got more to say than I ever could. Please be respectful." Evelyn took a breath. Public speaking had never scared her the way sniper fire or landmines did. But this opening up, this was its own kind of danger. She started slow. "I served in the Navy for 12 years, 6 of those with SEAL Team 12. I've been to places you've only seen in news reports. I've lost people I loved. I've made decisions that kept others alive. And some I still question." The class was quiet. Some looked at her with wide eyes. Others glanced at their desks, unsure of how to receive her honesty. Then, from the back row, a boy raised his hand. He was tall and lanky, hoodie pulled tight over his head, face guarded. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn nodded. "Why'd you stop? Why aren't you still doing it if you were so good?" The question hit her harder than expected. She stared at the boy, then at her hands, before replying. "Because I got tired of coming home in pieces," she said softly. "And one day, I realized I wasn't bringing all of me back anymore, just fragments." The room fell completely still. Then another hand went up, a girl this time, quiet voice, barely above a whisper. "Did it mess you up?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Yeah. For a long time, I didn't sleep, I didn't talk, I didn't trust people. I kept everything bottled up until I became someone even I didn't recognize." She paused, then looked at them directly. "But here's the thing. Strength isn't about holding it all in. It's about knowing when to let go, and who you can let it out with." A hush lingered in the room, not of boredom, but of something sacred. Someone had finally said aloud what many of them had been carrying in silence. After class, one student lingered behind a girl named Aria, 16, with shy eyes and a sleeve hiding fresh scars on her wrist. "Ms. Grant," she said, "you reminded me of my brother. He was in the Marines. He didn't talk much when he came home. I think it broke him." Evelyn gently placed a hand on Aria's shoulder. "Then let's make sure it doesn't break you." That day, something shifted in Evelyn. For the first time since she left the military, she didn't feel like a ghost moving through civilian life. She felt present, needed, not for what she could fight, but for what she could feel. That night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. She opened the Echo Shield website and filled out the form available for ongoing speaking engagements. The next day, she received 3 requests. One was a juvenile detention center. Another was a girls' home for runaway teens. The last was a virtual event for veterans struggling with PTSD. Evelyn accepted all 3. She didn't know where this new path would lead, but she knew one thing: the battlefield may have changed. But the mission hadn't. She was still saving lives. Only now, she did it with words, with presence, with truth. And for the first time in years, Evelyn felt whole again. Months passed. What started as a single visit to a high school classroom had now become Evelyn's quiet mission. She traveled across the country not as a soldier, not as a symbol, but as a storyteller, a healer, a reminder that even the strongest among us carry wounds we don't always see. One chilly evening in early spring, Evelyn was invited to speak at a Veteran Awareness Gala in Washington. Dabsu, she almost said no crowds still made her uneasy, the spotlight even more so. But something in her heart told her to go. This time, not for herself, but for the ones who never made it home. The event was held at the Kennedy Center. She sat backstage in a simple black suit, her old Navy SEAL pin tucked inside her pocket like a hidden piece of armor. The host introduced her with reverence. "Tonight, we honor a woman who redefined service not with medals, but with moments, not with noise, but with presence. Please welcome Evelyn Grant." She stepped onto the stage to a standing ovation. But when she reached the microphone, she didn't start with her military resume. She didn't recount her heroic moments on that flight, or her battlefield stories. Instead, she told the room about a girl named Aria, about a boy in a hoodie who asked why she stopped, about a classroom full of kids who taught her that bravery doesn't end with war. "My name is Evelyn," she said, voice calm but full, "and for years, I believed that once you hang up your uniform, your mission ends. But I was wrong." She looked out across the crowd full of generals, politicians, teachers, teenagers, and strangers who had seen her video, read her story, and followed her journey. "Our scars," she continued, "aren't weaknesses. They're roadmaps. Proof that we've been through hell and still found our way forward. You don't need to be a soldier to carry invisible wounds, and you don't need to be in combat to fight battles every single day." The room was silent. Not from boredom, but from the kind of stillness that comes when truth lands right in the center of your chest. Then Evelyn smiled something rare, but real. "I used to sit in the back," she said, "on planes, in meetings, in life. I thought that's where people like me belonged, out of sight, out of the way. But I've learned something." She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. "You don't need permission to take your seat in the front. You've already earned it just by surviving." Applause erupted. Not polite clapping, not the kind meant to be heard. This was felt thunderous, honest, rising like a wave of gratitude for every word, every silence, every tear she didn't shed until now. Backstage afterward, Evelyn sat alone for a moment, soaking it all in. A young woman approached mid-20s, trembling slightly. She said, "I never told anyone what I went through in Afghanistan. Until tonight." Evelyn reached out, took her hand. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." That's what Evelyn did now. She sat beside the ones who thought they were invisible. She listened, spoke when needed, and stayed silent when silence was the strongest answer. She never chased the spotlight, but it found her anyway because truth always does. And so, 1 year to the day since she was forced out of first class, Evelyn boarded another plane. Same airline, same seat number. Only this time, no one questioned her. She walked down the aisle not as someone out of place, but as someone who belonged not because of her clothes or her title, but because she knew now. Respect isn't given when you fit the mold. It's earned when you break it and still walk forward anyway. As she buckled her seatbelt, a flight attendant leaned in and smiled. "Welcome back, Commander." Evelyn looked out the window, smiled faintly, and whispered, "I'm home." Evelyn's story is a mirror held up to society's face, a stark reminder of how easily we judge, how quickly we categorize people based on appearance, status, or silence. She walked onto a plane as just another stranger, yet carried the weight of unspeakable sacrifice. And still, the world only noticed her worth when it exploded in action, when she proved it. But the real lesson is this: you should never have to earn dignity through performance. Respect should be the default, not the reward. Heroes aren't always in uniform. Sometimes they're the quiet woman in the airport, the kid at the back of the class, the man sitting alone on the subway. Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who say the least and carry the most. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share it with someone who needs a reminder. Real strength is often silent. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.